Good evening, Canada. Good morning, Taiwan. My name is Liren Chu. I am president of the GTMA Canada Global Health Association. We are associated with Global Taiwanese Medical Alliance. The abbreviation of this association is GTMA. Our association promotes dialogue and cooperation between Canada and Taiwan in the medical and global health areas. The forum is organized by both the GTMA Canada Global Health Association and the Global Taiwanese Medical Alliance. We organize this forum to bring together experts, researchers, and policymakers in COVID-19 control and vaccine technologies. They will provide diverse insights in vaccine development strategies. The forum especially emphasizes the efforts in coping COVID-19 and vaccine technologies, and will discuss related COVID-19 control strategies, such as vaccine passport and the related policy between Canada and Taiwan. Let me begin by giving you some background information about the moderators and panelists. The forum will be divided into two sections. Section 1 is moderated by Dr. Yijian Cai. He is Associate Executive Director of the GTMA. The panelists include Dr. Alex Chen. Dr. Chen is Professor of Imperial College in London, UK. Dr. Cassie Dai. Dr. Cassie Dai is Associate Director of Medical Affairs in Medigan Vaccine Biologics Corporations. The third panelist is Mei-Xiang Ho. Mei-Xiang Ho is researchers of Taiwan Seneca Academica. Session 2 is moderated by Dr. Wen Lai. Dr. Lai is clinical assistant professor of UBC. The panelists include Minister Audrey Tang. Minister Audrey Tang is Digital Minister of Taiwan. The second panelist is MP Joyce Murray. Joyce Murray is former Minister of Ministry of Digital Government of Canada from 2019 to 2021. The third panelist is Dr. Fuzhong Wang. Dr. Wang is Deputy Director General of Department of Information Management of Ministry of Health and Welfare. The final panelist is Dr. Junhui Ji. Dr. Ji is Professor and Director of Oregon State University Center for Global Health. The forum will last 2 hours. Each section lasts 50 minutes. We will have 15 minutes break between 2 sections. The section 2 will start at 6:10 p.m. PST time, which is 9:10 Taiwan time, and end at 7:05 p.m. PST time, which is 10:05 a.m. Taiwan time. At the end of the forum, Dr. Peter Zhang will conclude the discussion. Dr. Zhang is the global president of the GTMA. He is also the co-host of this forum. Now I'd like to move on to our panel discussion itself. Thank you for your attention.
Now it's time for section 1. I'm grateful to be invited here to moderate the first sections. Today we have 3 distinguished panelists. However, the first one is Dr. Alex Chen, but he's apologized for personal reasons. So we still have Dr. Casey Dai and researchers Mei-Xiang He to discuss. Now as we know that scientists around the world have made unprecedented efforts to develop safe and effective and also efficient vaccines against SARS-CoV-2. That there are many 5 strategies of vaccines development, including live attenuated and viral vector based and protein recombinant based, and there's DNA vaccines based and mRNA based vaccines. However, since vaccine development is as a lengthy and expensive process, and there's researchers face many challenges arising during the development, manufacturing, and the mass distribution of vaccine. So there are some criteria for an ideal vaccines. And these criteria including the vaccine should be effective, should be safe, should be immunogenicity retellings, and should be inexpensive and free from toxicity and adverse effect. Moreover, the vaccine and material vaccine should have a long-term protections, and there's have thermal stabilities. So, but however, in face of the challenge of the global vaccine inequalities, it is concerned that should an ideal vaccines be not only easy to raise up in an economical scale, but also accessible to the low SDIs and the low to middle SDI countries. I think this question one is worth our notice since in vaccine development. So I would like to invite our panelists, Dr. Casey Dai and Mei Xiang Ho, would like to address. Could you show your opinion, favors or you against the so-called ideas vaccines criteria? Would you like to provide some comments?
Dr. Tai, go first.
Yes.
Shall I start?
Yes, welcome.
I would just like to briefly remark that for pandemic situation, the mass production, capability of mass production is very important because you can research and develop a good vaccine, but somehow you just unable to deliver. So aside from all what's being said in what you just mentioned, the other very important issue would be mass production. As you can see that we have been long waiting for Novavax vaccine, and somehow it's just not coming out for lack of probably experiences in mass production. And so what's so good about a vaccine which cannot make it to the market. So that is one thing to say. But aside for a pandemic situation, one cannot really be too choosy about anything. Basically, as you can see that we as a whole, the global as a whole, whether WHO or FDA in any country, sets the vaccine efficacy at 50%. That's really relatively low. It's because there's a strong need for such vaccines. So as long as the vaccine side effect risk does not exceed the risk of the disease, and it benefits in some way, and it can be used, because in the pandemic situation, it's always weighed against the current urgent situation of the risk of the disease itself. So that's my opinion on what you mentioned, because all these other issues will become a non-issue for pandemic situation.
So yeah, I think that in face of the challenge of the global pandemics, almost every country is eager to procure or purchase a lot of amounts of vaccines, but actually, the vaccines market is quite competitive, and those who pay a lump sum, a big sum of money, could take the vaccines in advance. So I think it's but it's very difficult for any vaccine development companies to design a vaccine is in consideration of the 7 criteria. It's very in the very beginning. I think most companies will design it, pay attention to the safety and the effectiveness of the vaccine, rather than the accessibility to almost all countries. I think it's very difficult. Only in the later stage, when vaccines can be some mass production, that then the cost will be slow cost down, and will make the vaccines most accessible to the lower social development index countries or others. So I think for a vaccine to fulfill all of the 7 criteria, it seems impossible. But but always the vaccine could be revised or designed stage by stage, and the price could be cut down stage by stage according to the total amount produced. So that's my supplementary comment. So is there any feedback from Dr. Dai?
I think there may be more than one correct answer for this question. And I think this should not be a single choice question. And practically, we should lower our expectation of each criterion to fulfill the need of other criteria. For example, as a medical doctor, I would definitely think of safety and effectiveness as my first priorities. However, the safety of the vaccine should be assessed based on a benefit and risk evaluations. So I quite agree with Dr. Meixiang He that the risk of being infected with virus and getting severe disease should be also considered when measuring the other criterion of the vaccine, such as what I was concerned, safety and also the effectiveness. So with regard to effectiveness, we both know that the price of a 100% effective vaccine may be very high, and maybe for this effectiveness, we might sacrifice on the reactogenicity as well as the safety, and to achieve such high protection rate. So I think every criteria should be considered and set up a bottom line for each criterion to make a practicable vaccine. For example, for effectiveness, if we don't pursue 100% effectiveness, we just pursue the 100% effectiveness to protect from the severe or critical conditions, then I think the amendment for making such vaccine would be quite easier than making 100% effective vaccine to prevent infections only. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay. Now, let's shift to question 2. So, according to the WHO's interim recommendations, it is shown that the post-marketing surveillance is very important in terms of the safety effectiveness of the subpopulations or the virus variants, etc. So the question 2 is, what's your recommendation or plannings on post-marketing surveillance of the COVID-19 vaccinations, which is maybe an important evidence base for each country to further selection vaccines. What's your comment?
So I'd be the first to
take the question. Yes.
Okay. I think I'll go first. So as the only representative of industry here, so I think most of the manufacturing platform for COVID-19 vaccines are quite new, and we don't know if there will be safety issues after years. For example, for dengue fever vaccine, there's a so-called ADE, which is antibody-dependent enhancement. And this phenomenon occurred after years of vaccination because the waning of the neutralizing antibodies induced the ADE. And the other example is rotavirus vaccines, and the risk of intersusceptions was raised after large-scale use on the market. And there's another failure of example of vaccine, which is called Rsv Vaccine. this is the respiratory syncytial virus. And the respiratory syncytial virus vaccine induced a so-called VAERD, which is vaccine-associated enhanced respiratory disease. That means the vaccine does not protect the children from being infected with RS virus, but get more severe disease and even more critical after vaccination with this vaccine. And when he exposed the virus again, the condition makes the children become more sick and more critical. So for those kind of vaccine safety issues, you don't know the answer until large-scale use and until years after the vaccination. So therefore, a post-marketing surveillance or real-world data is deemed necessary for all innovative vaccines. However, the real-world data might be confounded with many variables, such as the subject's socio-economical status and the subject's comorbidities, and their decision of the vaccine brands may even be, influenced or correlated to what is their source information or their political interest or even their educational degrees or their beliefs or religions, such as we know that some religions does not accept any vaccine or medical product. So this kind of post-marketing surveillance usually relied on the nationwide setting of health database. So the same as the post-marketing effectiveness study. For example, this may I share my screen now? Where is? So can you see my screen now? It's a paper. Okay.
Yes.
So this paper is published on the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the top medical journal in the world. And the authors are mainly from the academia, and they utilize the data in a large health organizations. So they had matched over 880,000 in each group, in vaccine group and the group with not vaccinated. So, and they found that finally they found out that the BNT vaccines had the higher risk of myocarditis, lymphadenopathy, appendicitis, and herpes zoster infection. However, as what we have discussed in question 1, the condition of pandemic and the risk of getting infected should be considered together with the safety issues. So they will keep so the safety issues should really be continued monitoring and followed up. And the other paper, which is published on the Nature Medicine, which is a subsidiary journal of Nature. And the authors are also from the academia and use the Office for National Statistics COVID-19 Infection Survey, which is also a large community-based survey of individuals living in randomly selected private households across the United Kingdom. So the post-marketing surveillance needs the collaborations among industry, government, and the academia. So since for Medigen Vaccine Corporation, our COVID-19 vaccine, there are some criteria for this EUA granted by the TFDA. So among those criteria, they required 2 of the criteria are about the post-marketing surveillance of effectiveness and safety issues. So we are negotiating with the Ministry of Health and Welfare to share the database of from the health insurance system, and we are also seeking for the partners from the academia for research studies.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Dai's answer to this question too. Now, okay. Now let's.
Well, I would like to make some comments on
yes,
the.
Welcome, Dr. Ho.
I would like to make some comments on the post-market surveillance.
Yes.
Even if it's a full license vaccine, post-market surveillance is mandatory for any full license vaccine. Not to mention this is a EUA, and the clinical trial is much shorter and information is much less. So there should be many more directions and many more ways to set up to collect information as fast as on the real-time basis. So obviously, the easiest way to think about would be the national data, with national health insurance, with a pre-existing vaccine adverse effect reporting system, etc. Those will give us a lot of information. But at the same time, there should be efforts to be done much more than what's existing. For instance, with the current local outbreaks in Taiwan, we will know, even though Taiwan is a very small island, but still epidemic situation, the transmission density varies from places to places, and the effectiveness of vaccine would be reflected by the local factors. So actually, at this moment, I have advised some of the local governments that they should continue to keep track of the vaccines they administer to their group of people, say minimally by age in their district, because ultimately what is going to give the information will be the detailed local information, not the national data. National data, of course, will give a lot of information. I would talk about some of that later on, but effort should be done locally, and information can be collected because lots of breakthrough infections taking place now in Taiwan, whether be it post 1 dose or post 2 doses or whatever, imported cases, etc. Those can also be in some way counted in the way, and you stratify with your denominator and numerators, and ready. And as new cases coming, you just add to it, and then you would see some information as it comes along. So this is the effort I would advise some of the local governments to do it, because centrally cannot homogenize the epidemic situation in a country. So that's something I would think it's important, because a lot of detailed information has to come from local data. Okay, yes, that's my remarks on post-market.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Mei Xiangho's supplementary comment.
And also, I have a strong feeling about post-market surveillance under the EUA situation, because first of all, obviously, Medigen, the company, is accountable for their vaccine and they need to do it. But in fact, whoever issues the EUA, that's our TFDA. That's our Ministry of Health. So when they issue the EUA, that's their scientific judgment, or whatever the judgment, thinking that administering this vaccine is better than not administering this vaccine, given that very limited information there is. So the government should be accountable to the people. So they have to collect information. Even if Medigen did not do anything, the government has to come up with information to report to the people the vaccine we give to you in the end, what it shows with such a benefit or risks or whatever. So these are what I think, something very special during the pandemic and under the EUA use. This is something, a new era for all of us, and we are learning about it and thinking about it, what needs to be done. So that's my remarks on that.
Yeah, I think that's thank you. So Dr. Mei Xiangho's feedback. I think that the post-marketing surveillance of the COVID-19 vaccination is very important for Taiwan because we have already introduced different kinds of vaccines in Taiwan, including the Moderna's, AZ, and the BNT's and the Medigen's vaccines. Well, we know it's very difficult to have evaluated the safety and the effectiveness in the mass injections or mass vaccination of vaccines. So we need to have probably have the quite similar amount of the population base as a denominator of the vaccines, and then we can count the instance rate or the adverse events following the immunizations. So I think it's probably academic clinicals could play as neutral roles because medicine companies has to avoid the conflict of interest. So I think Dr. Mei Xiangho probably is the best candidate to play the key person if to submit post-marketing surveillance of the mass vaccination in Taiwan. What's your comment?
There would be a great news for, on behalf of Medigen, I would say there would be a great news for us. And we are eager to seek collaborations with academia and also the government. And actually, I would like to echo with Dr. He, because this follow-up and also the surveillance would really needs the great help or assistance from the government sides. And as I know, they are actually setting up the system called VIRS and also VWatch for each brand of EU vaccines for COVID-19 vaccine. But I think to generate a solid data and a good result, there's a gap between what they already have done. So I think the assistance of a very strong academia like Zhongyan Yuan would be a very good choice for the collaboration between the industry and also the government and also the academia.
Well, I think the best would be multi-partners, taking the public health institutes. We have so many public health institutes, having the students and the professors and each play different roles with data shared by all of them, and then each one focus on differences, on different issues of analysis, so that all the data is open to the public. So in that way, that nobody would be able to say there's any underground sort of movement or underground sort of doing, etc. So it's very important that it's done in a transparent way. It's very important that with multi-partners, even academia Sinica, sometimes, we cannot withhold, a lot of attacks, and it's unfounded attack, basically. So this is something we have to really do it with great effort and with a lot of collaboration. And so to build up the confidence for our people. It's really very important. And besides, I had suggested having an app to report any adverse effect or anything, but somehow that was not done. You know, with the app, it will be much more sensitive. Any vaccinees, they can report whatever they feel or they think is vaccine related, and in the end, they can, you know, do a mass data analysis to see what's real and what's the background. But anyway, that's just a talk.
Thank you. We still it is still optimistic to looking forward to having a good post-marketing surveillance system for the diverse events following immunizations in the futures. So now let's skip to questions, please. As we know, compared with adults, children are less likely to be infected with COVID-19, but children still can be infected with COVID-19 and get sick with COVID-19 and spread COVID-19 to other people. So the CDC recommends children or everyone's age 12 and older recommended to get COVID-19 vaccination to help stop the pandemic. And the WHO's interim recommendations post the same positions. However, according to comprehensive literature reviews for clinical trial assessing the safety of COVID-19 vaccinations, inactivated vaccines seems to have lower adverse events following immunization instance than virus vectors-based or mRNA-based vaccines. Moreover, the total fertility rate of Taiwan has been declining under 2.1, the replacement levels, since 1984. So every child is invaluable to his family and as well as to the countries. And many parents are worrying about the adverse events following immunizations in Taiwan. So, but however, the program of mass vaccination in the campus is ongoing now. So, how to evaluate or balance the risk against benefit? I would like to hear from Dr. Mei Xiangholt. Thank you.
I raised this issue basically because currently, globally, there is only one children's vaccine for COVID-19. That's mRNA and that's BNT. And so that's being used by several countries where their epidemic situation has been really, really severe. So in such a case, we in Taiwan are following the lead of other countries. But nevertheless, I would like to raise some issues of concern on vaccinating children because, first of all, is someone sharing my file for me? Okay, second slide. We can look at the second slide. That the special consideration for our mRNA vaccines. First of all, we should, whenever we implement a vaccine program, we would always hope that the benefit of the vaccine outweigh the risk of the disease. So we should look at the benefit of the vaccine, but of course, the risk of the disease is, first of all, very low in children comparing the adults. Then second of all, the risk of post-vaccine severe adverse consequences, to me, seems to be higher than adults. The most severe one in adults and most frequently seen for mRNA seems to be anaphylactic shock, but that is resolvable and predictable and not predictable, but resolvable in an immediate fashion. But the myocarditis in children, first of all, it seems to increase occurrence with younger age. So as you go downward and it's younger, it's higher. Second of all, the pathogenic mechanism is really unclear at this moment. Therefore, we cannot know, we cannot predict what's the long-term effect of this myocarditis, whether it's going to be ongoing into a chronic situation or whether it will resolve itself, because there's never a biopsy done for these children. And then thirdly, the clinical trial, the length is very short term, even though the number is great, that comes to, thousands and 30,000 or whatever for each vaccine. But nevertheless, comparing with the historical approved vaccine, we're taking the US situation since 2006 until now, the phase 3 trial of all the vaccines, many of them including the first of the disease, meaning the first vaccine for a new disease, the median length was 18 months. So you can see our 6 months is really, really very short. Finally, the clinical trial really did not address the long-term effects, what's most relevant to children. And also there is high post-inoculation death, which you probably never have heard in the US. So I'm gonna show a couple of the slides for you. This just came out, this is the US data. On the left side, you could see that on the left side, that's COVID-19 deaths per million. And you can see that children is very, very low, and adults, it goes really up with increasing age. And again, the post-inoculation death, this is also US data through their pre-existing surveillance and showing 7-day average death. You could see that even in the children, that seems to be higher in a relative sense, comparing with the adult death. So I just kind of looked at this. Basically, there's a lot of concern about new technology to begin with in my heart. But then in the recent week, this data just came out more and more. We can look at next slide. That's another paper. This shows that myocarditis, the frequency of myocarditis, it was estimated to be 94 per million on the left side, in the study. But the CDC estimates 66 and US FDA estimated 200 per million. And on the left side, that on the top, those are the instances of hospitalization due to COVID-19 for children. On the top, those are the children with no chronic diseases, and at the bottom, those are children with chronic diseases. So for most of the healthy children, receiving vaccine and having to be hospitalized the risk is much higher than getting infected and being hospitalized for COVID-19 infection. So this is the data, again, using the US data to to model it and to estimate it. So one can, take a situation. But again, we can look at next slide. The remedy is that in that study, they looked at the first dose and second dose. It shows that most of the myocarditis occurs in the second dose. So basically, one can conclude that the second dose is more likely to have myocarditis than receiving the first dose. The male is higher than the female. The younger ones are higher than the older ones. So in this situation, even though we have begun to inoculate children starting 2 days ago, but that's fortunately the first dose. I think at this moment we should advocate not to give this second dose. Second of all, for those small percentage of children who did not receive BNT vaccine, there's still data. I understand that Medigen is conducting children's trial, so we can look at to see how the data comes. And basically, I think with time, it's going to be more apparent that there is still role for protein-based subunit vaccine, even though everyone right now, we all go crazy about mRNA vaccine, this novel, this innovative technology, because it such fastly give us provide the vaccine to the global population. But still, I think in the long run, when one can think about what's with children, because for pandemic, for some reason, it affects the older population much more. The same for Ebola, the same for SARS, the same for COVID-19, etc. So the older generation is one consideration, but the children is another consideration. So this is my views about children's risk and benefit analysis. So that's all I have to say.
So is there any feedback from Dr. Dice?
You are muted. You are muted. Dr. Dai, you are muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for reminding. I actually would like to echo with Dr. He, and I share a picture. I wonder if you can see it, and this is the light blue bar represents the low disease prevalence of risk, and the medium blue bar represents the moderate disease prevalence, and the dark or the deep blue bar represents the high disease prevalence of the risk of getting disease for severe disease, the risk of the prevalence. And actually for the vaccine associated risk of boys ages 12 to 15 and 16 to 17, and for high disease prevalence area, this benefit might be still superior to the risk of getting vaccinated associated risk. However, for actually the low disease prevalence area, just like what Dr. He says, the risk of getting vaccine associated disease is actually higher than the true risk of getting severe disease. So I actually I think the United Kingdom, they have the ACIP of United Kingdom, they have announced their suggestion for those adolescents for BNT vaccines, and they says that they still recommend vaccination for the adolescent ages. However, for 12 to 15 ages and the boys, which has the highest risk of getting myocarditis, they suggest they may be administered for dose 1 only. They do not recommend dose 2 because the risk for myocarditis is higher for dose 2. So this is my my comments for this topic.
Okay, thank you for Dr. He's and Dr. Dai's descriptions on the question 3, and provide us with many enlightening ideas about COVID-19's vaccinations, developments, and post-marketing surveillance, and weighing the risk against the benefits of the vaccination for children. I think it's time we have to close the section 1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good morning and good afternoon. Hello. This is the second segment of our panel discussion hosted by GTMA, Canada Global Health Association. In the following hours, we will be discussing on the benefit and the challenges of vaccine passport and its technical, ethical, legal, and privacy considerations. I'm very honored to be joined today by great panelists from US and Taiwan. Our first panelist was going to be Minister Joyce Murray. Unfortunately, Minister Murray has to cancel her participation in today's event. She sincerely apologized for the short notice and hope that the importance of the forum is a success. Our second panelist is Deputy Director General Fuchang Wang. Fuchang Wang is the Director General for Department of Information Management in Ministry of Health and Welfare in Taiwan. After completing his PhD and master's degree in Management Information System in National Changshu University and received additional master's degree in Executive Master of Health Administration at National Taiwan University. He has since over 20 years of working experience in Taiwan National Health Insurance Administration. Deputy Director Wang began his career with NHIA in 1995 and worked on several different departments. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he participated in the implementation of entry quarantine system and home quarantine tracking system. More recently, Deputy Director Wang focused on the planning of digital COVID certificate to help to break the chain of COVID-19 spread. We're very happy to have him on our panel today. Our third panelist is Professor Changshu Ji. After completing his Doctor of Science degree in Health Policy and Management from Harvard School of Public Health, he went to Oregon State University to assume a faculty position where he established the International Health Program in 1993, which was then renewed as Global Health Program. He served as its director until 2017, and also in 2014, he established the Center of Global Health at OSU and served as its founding director to this day. Further, he has assisted and collaborated with multiple Taiwanese universities and also with National University of Chile Faculty of Economy and Business on the Chilean healthcare system and policies. He serves as a consultant for multiple Taiwan National Health Department, and his expertise, including global health governance, international collaboration in health development, health policy analysis, and comparative policy of COVID-19 pandemic control. We're very honored to have Professor Chi on our panel today as well. Lastly, Minister Audrey Tang is our panelist. He is the Taiwan Digital Minister in charge of social innovations. Minister Tang is known for revitalizing the computer language Perl and Haskell, as well as building the online spreadsheet system EtherCal in collaboration with Dan Brickland. In the public sector, Minister Tang served on Taiwan National Development Council's Open Data Committee and the 12-year basic educational curriculum. In the social sector, Minister Tang actively contributed to GOV, a vibrant community focusing on creating tools for the civil society with a call to fork the government. My name is Wayne Lai. I am a practicing neurologist and a clinical assistant professor at UBC. Regretfully, due to parliamentary duty, Minister Tang is not able to partake in the live discussion today. So before we commence our live discussion, I would like to kick off with a pre-recorded video from Minister Tang.
Good local time, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here virtually to say a few words to our friends in Taiwan, in Canada, and in many other places around the world. I'd like to share with you some thoughts about COVID-19 vaccine passport. Since early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic has swept across the globe, and many of us have endured more than a year of closures, as well as restrictions on international travel. Of course, these are necessary measures to prevent the disease from crossing borders and spreading, but now we're seeing that the virus, along with various mutations, are probably here to stay in the foreseeable future. Well, countries around the world are now working hard to find ways to cope with this new normal and revitalize the global economy. Many obstacles still remain before us, and one of the greatest challenges we face is the facilitation of international travel. Taiwan's economy is a market economy, highly developed in the industrial and service sectors, and we're also highly reliant on foreign trade, as we are surrounded by the sea and need to continuously seek opportunities to expand trade links with other countries as a main driving force for our economic growth. And as we all know, international travel plays an indispensable role in enhancing foreign trade. But for many people, it is simply currently impossible to avoid international travel in their daily work. We all understand how distressing it would be when you're finally, for example, admitted to the college you dream of, but then realize it may take you forever to get on board and get into the country. We also understand how heartbreaking it would be when you and your loved ones are separated by oceans and haven't been able to embrace each other, except in virtual reality. So we have noticed that there are discussions among the international community about the implementation of an internationally recognized digital vaccine passport. Now, several issues arise. Obviously, protection of data privacy, but also digital divide and inequities. Taiwan has been continuously researching various practices, standards, and formats adopted especially by the European Union, but also international organizations such as the World Health Organization. So we're currently in the process of planning our digital platform for vaccine certification. We do have a reference implementation ready in the hope that we can quickly get into step with the international community. Now, there are many differences between Taiwan and Canada. Obviously, Taiwan is just a small country with a few islands, with a landmass of 36,000 square kilometers, roughly the same size as the US state of Maryland. Whereas Canada, with the landmass of 9.1 million square meters, is the second largest country in the world. However, we do have similarities. We do have shared values of democracy, of freedom, of human rights. And I think the event today is both meaningful and timely, and I believe the discussions will be helpful for us to learn from each other. Lastly, I would like to extend my sincerest appreciation for the kind invitation from Global Taiwanese Medical Association Canada. I wish this event a great success. Thank you. Live long and prosper.
Well, thank you so much to Minister Tang for taking her precious time to pre-record this video for us. In the video, Minister Tang has summarized the topic on vaccine passport quite nicely and have touched upon several topics that we will further discuss today. Without any further delay, let us get into the panel discussion today, and I would like to bring forth some background information before posting the first question to our panelists. So based on the report in JAMA 2020 by Dr. Cutler and Dr. Summer from Harvard School of Medicine, the total estimate cost of COVID-19 in the US is $16.5 trillion. To put that in perspective, it's about 90% of US GDP. In the US, for the herd immunity to be effective, 58 to 94% of the population need to be immunized, which translates to 192 to 311 million of Americans. Currently, as of September 11, UAE has the highest vaccination rate at 89%, of which 78 are fully vaccinated with 2 doses. On the other spectrum, Tanzania only has 0.5% of vaccination rate. Here in Canada, we have 74% vaccination rate, with 68% being fully vaccinated. And in Taiwan, 47 are vaccinated, with 43 being partially vaccinated with the first dose. One of the primary goals of many countries, especially in countries where adequate vaccines are available, to at least obtain partial immunization to a certain critical threshold, is to reopen the economy as fast and as safely as possible, and also to be able to resume international trade and travel without putting one's country at greater risk. The first question I would like to open up discuss what really is vaccine passport. What does that really mean, and what does a vaccine passport would allow individual to do? Perhaps we can start the question with Professor Ji, if you don't mind.
Yes, a vaccine passport, even though it's called passport, technically is more of a certificate to prove someone has been adequately vaccinated against the described disease. And that is not a new idea. I think we can trace back in the history back to 1933. The International Aviation Federations, they started this idea of vaccine certificate because when the aviation, particularly commercial aviation, was just about to begin, there's a great concern about the speed of transmission of communicable diseases. And so since then, it's nearly 80 years. The world has evolved around the idea of vaccine passport. Most widely used to date has been the yellow fever, and that has the nickname yellow passport. Many African countries still require visitors who enter the border to show they are properly vaccinated against yellow fever. And I personally had that experience when I visited Ethiopia. I have to be vaccinated against yellow fever, so I have my yellow fever, the yellow passport. But more widely, when we think of vaccine passport as a certificate proven someone has been adequately vaccinated against the described disease, there are other diseases in different time and different country. They have been issued vaccine certificate. And let me just give you one example from Taiwan. In 1962, during the summer, the cholera, there was an epidemic of cholera in Taiwan. And so the government required everyone to be vaccinated with cholera, and also issued a cholera certificate. And I remember at that time reading from the news, in many public transportation center, particularly railway station, there were police to check on passengers' cholera vaccine certificate. And I have heard people and even friends who forgot to brought their cholera certificate, and immediately there were vaccination stations in many train stations in the big cities, and they were immediately giving a shot so they can get on board on the train. So as early as 1962, Taiwan had issued a cholera certificate. So the certificate or passport mainly serve the purpose of validating someone has been adequately vaccinated against the stated disease. So that's just a brief history and overview of what a vaccine passport or certificate is about.
Thank you so much, Professor Ji. And I'm wondering from a question to Deputy Director Wang. From the government perspective, what does the vaccine passport mean to its citizens from your point of view, if you don't mind sharing?
Okay, thank you. We heard vaccine passport often from worldwide, and somebody will announce a vaccine passport is a paradigm shift for people embracing a new normal. However, I would like to say the digital COVID certificate rather than a vaccine passport, as a passport is easily to misunderstanding as a necessity of the travel. The certificate is a digital proof that a person has been vaccinated or received a negative test result. So the data is not only motivation, and in situation where the public is willing to use it, show it as a tool to help in epidemic prevention and reduce travel restrictions. Besides, individual possession of whole information is an important criteria of the balance between digital freedom and digital controlling. Meanwhile, I must emphasize that the digital certificate is just one of the ways to prove vaccination. International certificate of vaccination, like the Professor Ji already mentioned, that already existing in paper form for a long time ago, and it is still the most convenient way for the worldwide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we heard the historic background on vaccine passport and the fact that that this COVID vaccine passport is not the novel concept that's been introduced in the past. We have yellow fever that passport was issued so that a traveler can travel to a certain country and proven to be safe to be there. And from Deputy Director Wang's sharing that it actually brings us to the second question, which is the extension of the number one, is that if one was to Google COVID vaccine passport, which I have as I was preparing for this, moderating this panel, there's so many different names that comes out, and I don't know if they're equivalent or they all talk about the same things or they have a different, deeper meaning behind the name. You know, names such as digital health pass, digital health license, vaccine immunization certificate, COVID-19 vaccination certificate, or sometimes it's been referred to green booklet, such as in the case of Israel when they had issued their vaccine certificate, being one of the very first one in the world. And I'm just kind of curious as to why there is such a controversial and different naming to this particular event or this phenomenon. Professor Ji, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. I think the controversy probably less lying in the naming of the certificate, as each country or in the United States, state like New York State, they want to give it a unique name, but behind the name, any unique name, is basically the same idea of vaccine certificate. And the function of the vaccine certificate is mainly to provide for organizations who want to apply that certificate or examine that certificate to know a verifiable risk of the person who holds that certificate. So that's the same reason New York State was the first state to issue that certificate. They call it Excelsior Pass. And Israel was the first nation to issue that certificate called Green Pass. And if you look at their initial purpose in legislation, they serve the very similar function. Because during the pandemic, it's a high risk for big gathering such as sports arena, big wedding, concert, theater, etc. But vaccination is an important path for us to gradually move towards normal life. But how do we move towards normal life with vaccination? That means it has to be verified. So both Israel and New York City, they did the same thing. They require people who attend big wedding, restaurant, big sports event, theater, etc., to show that certificate. People who does not show that certificate, they, in the case of New York, they have the alternative. They have to provide a test negative proof within 48 hours of the event. So they're not shutting down people who don't have the vaccine certificate. And you mentioned about Israel. Israel eventually abandoned that. So they were the first in and first out in terms of vaccine certificate. And Israel provides us a very important lesson. The reason they eventually abandoned that, technically, when they legislate that back in February, they intentionally put that vaccine certificate, the Green Pass legislation, as a sunset law, that it has a limited time span. And the reason they did not extend it in June was because they encountered two major concerns. One was the concern between individual liberty and public health concerns. And this is a difficult decision, weighing between protecting individual liberty versus public health safety requirements. It's not an easy decision to decide. And in the case of Israel, by June, they have achieved a very high rate of population fully vaccinated. And so the initial public health concerns are no longer the case. So that's one of the reasons that by weighing between individual liberty versus public health concern, that in February, I think the public health concern outweighed individual liberty. By June, Israel decided at that time, the individual liberty outweighed public health concern. And the second reason Israel did not extend that certificate law, the vaccine certificate law, was because when they issued the Green Pass, within the legislation, there were stated purpose and function. However, so this is an important lesson for all nations to take into heart. When the government issues a certificate with a very specific purpose, it's very difficult to prevent other organizations, especially private sector, to expand the usage of that certificate. And this happened in Israel. That while that certificate was intended to provide a verifiable risk for big gathering, which otherwise is difficult to protect safety and hygiene during the pandemic, but gradually many employers started to use that to discriminate against people who don't have the certificate. So that created a big problem within the society. That was never an intention for the certificate to become a device, a means to discriminate against people. So these are the two important reasons, among others, that Israel decided not to extend that.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Ji, for sharing that. I will definitely expand that on the latter half of the panel discussion when we come to talk about the challenges of vaccine certificate or the vaccine passport. I just want to share a comment that was made by one of the political science professor here in Canada, Tom Urbanic. He had commented on the fact that some of the provincial government does not wish to use the term vaccine passport. It's because passport indicate a federal jurisdiction that relate to international travel and citizenship. So provincial government want to be very careful when making that, and in case if and when it is challenged in court, they do not want to, they don't want their system to be reversed on the technicality. So I do wonder if Taiwan would encounter the similar problem, or would the US have a similar dilemma as well?
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think the WHO is not yet support the decision of the making vaccine certificate as a necessity of travel for its member state. We are also intending not to use the word of the passport in our related meeting discussion of the Central Epidemic Commanding Centers, so-called CECC. Besides, although both healthcare provider and the government could issue the certificate, we are planning to issue from the central government in Taiwan to avoid those debates. And I will mention that Taiwan is right now preparing the issuance of the digital COVID certificate, following and referring WHO and the EU standards. During the development of the digital certificate, we have reviewed the current practice over the world. We found out that the global trust framework should be serving well the purpose of using the certificate internationally. However, WHO announced to suspend this framework in June. Fortunately, EU used a similar framework with offline verification and the public key exchange. It is also an effective way of using the certificate internationally. Many other countries adapt real-time and more complicated technologies to assure the information is valid. It may be feasible in domestic use, but it will have problems when people use to across the border. This is one reason why I mentioned that the individuals should keep their whole information to avoid to access the remote data when verify the certificate, not only for privacy issue, but also interoperability. Digital certificate would be used in a new normal as a lifestyle. However, for long-term perspective, the standards of the data exchange are still need to implement. WHO's commitment to adopt FHIR technology, so-called faster healthcare interoperability resource, it's a good way of promoting it, but it needed to take time to develop and implement. Due to the urgency of the epidemic, my suggestion is to consider a strategy that following but not fully implement the FHIR standards at this moment, just like the EU did. The technology of the digital vaccine certificate is not brand new, and the insurance is also not a big deal. The most important thing is the application scenario. How to use the certificate is a critical issue. The vaccine rate in each country is not the same. So is the epidemic control situation. In Taiwan, only 15% are vaccinated and about 8% being fully vaccinated. At this moment, it is not so urgent to issue the certificate domestically in Taiwan. If a digital certificate is issued and used to restrict people's travel improperly, the unfairness to those who has not yet been vaccinated will be brought up, and the country's overall epidemic policy will also be challenged. This is the reason why the population is already underway, but issuing still need consensus in Taiwan. Another reason is that Taiwan has successfully used the digital technology to strengthen its efforts in controlling the COVID-19 pandemic, including establish a pandemic prevention system from the border to the community, and name-based discretionary system for purchase and the travel history tracking in Medi-Cloud system, which is similar to the PharmaNet in British Columbia. But the system function is including but not limited. Therefore, as COVID prevention, digital vaccine certificate is not irreplaceable in Taiwan. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director Wang. You certainly had touched quite a bit on some of the challenges that we will be discussing on our second questions. I will certainly go back to the question I posted regarding this is more like a legal issue as to under what jurisdiction does the health system or the health authority or issuing vaccine passport under. In Canada, our government are divided into provincial and federal, and in US it has states and also federal. But in Taiwan, I'm not quite as familiar as the government structure, but we'll certainly go back when we talk about some of the legal framework and questions in regarding vaccine passport. And before we move on to question number 2, which is the challenge of vaccine certificate or the passport, I was hoping, being a Taiwanese Canadian, I'm really proud of how well Taiwan had controlled the COVID infection in the last 18 months. And I was hoping Deputy Director Wang can share your experience in how Taiwan can effectively control the spread of infections. If I recall correctly, it is not until about mid-May 2021 that Taiwan started seeing the increasing number of domestically spread of COVID-19. Prior to that, people in Taiwan can live as normally as they can, relatively speaking, compared to other countries. I was hoping that you can share your experience of how Taiwan can effectively control those infections and how the experience gained or the knowledge learned from that can be applied towards developing vaccine passport certificate in the long term.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lai. For my opinion, I think there will be 2 critical successful factors from the ICT perspective, and these 2 ICT is function very well in the early stage deployment in Taiwan. That will be one of is apply a currently national health insurance system is to enhance epidemic prevention and control. Another is establish a pandemic preventive system from border to community. The first, I mentioned that the application of the current national health insurance system to enhance COVID-19 prevention and control. There are 2 components in this mechanism. One is the travel history tracking I mentioned before. The early stage of the CECC established, the CECC decided to utilize the medical system from the NHIA to provide inquiry service for travel history. The medical cloud system it has been expanding its service and function to provide the patient information to hospital and the clinic since it launched in 2015. After years of the promotion and the system advance, the usage of the medical cloud is currently over 99%, and the medical cloud has become the essential platform and the information sharing among the medical providers. Once interface linkage was established between the National Immigration Agency and the NHIA in the early stage, the travel information database was integrated with the medical record with just few days. The NHIA has been also provided inquiry service for travel history among infected countries or regions. In response to the perception of the COVID-19 pandemic, the features of query were widely range of the travel history and the occupation was included. These features contribute greatly to the prevention of the infection and enable timely screening to prevent the COVID-19 outbreak. Frontline medical workers are able to identify potentially infected individual on the basis of their travel history and has reported symptoms with the aid of real-time alerts from the integrated information and take appropriate steps to protect themselves from the COVID-19. Another is the name-based mask rationing system for purchase. In response to the face mask shortfall, the government began to increase face mask production to ensure all citizens has equal access to the high-quality face mask. The policy that the government deploys the name-based mask rational system ensuring fair distribution of the face mask in the community. Since all citizens abandon a NHIC card, the CCC instructed the NHIA to contract pharmacy to link with the medical cloud system, such that the policy of 3 face masks per week per individual can be executed for all individuals. The policy utilizes the information that the NHIC card provides to verify and control the allocation of the face masks to ensure that everyone to access face mask for basic protection against COVID-19. The last I mentioned another critical success factor is the establishment of the pandemic prevention system from the border to the community. The information-driven system was ready for launch after 2 weeks of brainstorming idea to the completion of the entire system. In the middle February 2020, the information system became available and allowed data linkage among border control and the local government service with the advanced passenger information system from the National Immigration Agency and the Household Registration Information System from the Department of Household Affairs. For the management of home quarantine case, immigration information can be delivered in a timely manner to the home quarantine management system, which is based on the regional joint defense concept to directly assign people who require home quarantine to live to the village, which prevents delay in the information transfer initially when the system has established issues such as the submission of the incorrect country information were reported. The region-based civil affairs person are responsible for confirming whether the individual has returned to the correct home quarantine location. If not, all the other possible address or telephone number may be used to track the individual down. If needed, the civil affairs person will check on the individual in person to ensure the individual stay at the designated quarantine location. This is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So it sounded to me that Taiwan has such an integrated health system and was able to respond to changes rather quickly through digital innovation. In Canada, we also have a health system as well, but we are not, in my opinion, we could have learned quite a bit from Taiwan, hoping that in the future we'll have more dialogue and conversation between Taiwan and Canada, and hopefully US as well. So let's move on to our second question about challenge of vaccine certificates. And I'd like to approach this from talking about the technical, ethical, legal, and confidentiality perspective. I was hoping that Professor Chi, would you mind start off by talking what are the technical challenges that you see when one is developing vaccine passport certificate? You had mentioned 2 very important points, which are the defined use in the cases of Israel, and also the condition of the use need to be understood and accepted. Would you mind share further on this technicality of developing vaccine passport?
Yes. For the COVID-19 vaccine certificate, let's say compare with yellow fever, the widely used for more than half century. One of the big challenges and difference, if we compare with the yellow fever certificate, is the length of immunity that develop as a result of vaccination. As we are still in the progress of understanding how long our current vaccine, the protection will last. For the yellow fever, it's already well established. The yellow fever vaccine, one dose will last about 10 years. And that's quite easy for yellow fever certificate. That's each yellow fever certificate, its validity is for 10 years. If it's beyond 10 years, that is no longer valid. But that presents a big challenge for COVID-19 certificate because we don't have a full picture of how long a fully vaccinated person is protected. And recently, there are increasing research, but still not a full picture. That shows, for example, one of the recent US CDC report shows that the Pfizer-BioNTech fully vaccinated person, their neutralizing antibody started to decline after 120 days. Whereas Moderna experienced a very minimal decline. So using this report, this latest report from US CDC as an example, we are facing with the challenge not only unknown length of protection or validity, but also another bigger challenge is not all vaccines are created equal. And so this is a big challenge on how long will a vaccine certificate for COVID-19 be valid? And that is something remains to be seen because we still don't have a full picture. And that also brings in another related question in terms of the validity of the certificate. Because earlier I mentioned one key function of a vaccine certificate is to provide a verifiable risk identification. The risk identification in the case of COVID-19 is transmission. And we do have a little bit evidence. The breakthrough infection can also transmit the virus, except the risk of transmission in a breakthrough infection is much, much lower than for unvaccinated people. But if the purpose of vaccine certificate is to identify verifiable risk, then we will be challenged for people who have been infected with COVID-19 and recovered, but without vaccinated. They may also present a very verifiable risk, in this case, low risk of transmission. And over the summer, there have been a few clinical research data and epidemiological research data published in the medical journal that further provide this challenge. And a few of those papers, based on their evidence, indicate the natural infected people who develop immunity, their strength and length of immunity is stronger and longer than vaccine-induced immunity. And we still need further verification, but so far the published research support that. But if eventually this is fully verified, meaning people who recover from previous infection their immunity are stronger and last longer than people who have been vaccinated, then the vaccine certificate might have to be changed. The name might have to be changed from vaccine certificate to immunity certificate. Because if the purpose is to provide a verifiable risk, then we cannot ignore this evidence. People who recover from infection, they can provide at least equal, if not stronger, immunity. So these are the big challenge, technical challenge in how long this certificate is valid. And we don't have an answer yet.
Thank you, Professor Chi. Yeah, so definitely, vaccine being new, treating COVID-19 or preventing COVID-19, we definitely don't have a long-term understanding of the immunity generated by the vaccination, and that certainly will pose a lot of challenges, especially when there are a lot of different variants that's coming out along the way as well. We have about 5 more minutes left, so I'm gonna skip to one other topic and head to the last one, the extension of question 2 on legal and privacy issue. And I like to quote a sentence that was quoted by Professor Chi during the interview by Mr. Evan Feigenbond. Professor Chi said that how can democracy mobilize against an ensuing pandemic threat while protect individual privacy, which is a fairly big issue in across the globe. Some people feel the policy is an infringement of individual constitutional right. Rather than seeing vaccine passport or certificate being a digital freedom, some are seeing it as a digital control. And I like to engage what your thoughts are, Professor Chi, as well as Deputy Director Wang.
Well, I just spent quite a few time comment on that. I'll let Dr. Wang go first, please.
Okay. I think my recommendation is a certificate which can be based on risk consideration for the international traveler. However, as suggested by the WHO, it should not be a must for international travel, which means there should be another alternative mechanism still. It needed to consider carefully for the argument with the benefit of the epidemic prevention and the human rights for the domestic use. The vaccine certificate should not be confused with the vaccination. The purpose of the using vaccine certificate is to provide a proof that the holder is vaccinated. It shouldn't prove the holder will not be affected by the virus. Well, before any discussion regarding ethical challenge, the question of should people be forced to vaccinated should be discussed first. This is my opinion.
Thank you so much. Professor Chi, do you have anything else to add?
Yes, back to your question. And I think in a democracy, one important principle of governance is public participation. And the issue of vaccine certificate, given the underlying technical difficulty has not been resolved, there is no urgency. That it doesn't mean we need it right now, even though in practice, country and in the United States, some state like Oregon already being applied in different purpose. But before we finalize it, I think we need to engage the public in the discussion and in the debate way between the public health safety that's also related to how we can resume normal activity during the pandemic versus the protection of individual privacy. And I think this is not unique in the COVID-19. Whenever there's an emergency, whether it's natural or human-made or biological or environmental, we have to address those issues to weigh in between the collective safety versus individual privacy and liberty.
Thank you, Professor Ji. Certainly, this is a fairly controversial and very difficult topic to discuss. The core of democracy is truly engaging public's participation in collecting different opinions and inputs from all society. And this is how a society can function at a democratic level. I'd like to thank you so very much for participating in today's discussions. I would like to turn the host back to Dr. Peter Chen to conclude today's panel discussion.
Well, thank you, Wayne, for this is the second session of this very important topic program today. And I thank both from Dr. Tsai, who is the organizer and also the moderator for the session in the first session, and two speakers, Dr. Ho and Dr. Tai, both from Taiwan, and also appreciate the presentation of Minister Tang in the second session, and also a very important presentation by Dr. Ji and Dr. Wang. Thank you so much. I'm listening to your discussion very, very carefully and very, very impressive. And also the topic is very timely. And I reflect what Wayne just said, that both Canada and Taiwan are democratic societies. And the vaccination apparently is a national program. I believe in Canada, in Taiwan, this is the national program. And this is a national issue. And the vaccine effectiveness is the national protection for public health and for individuals. So I appreciate Dr. Joe organized this very timely. I have a few remain homework, which for myself and for all of you could be very important because Canada and Taiwan has some similarity in terms of a healthcare system. In 1995, before 1995, when Taiwan started the NHI, now our Dr. Wang is talking about NHIA, we learned a lot from Canada. And now it's almost quite 30 years. Huh? It's going to be 30 years very soon. And it's quite important for this moment for us to compare, particularly for this pandemic management and hazard control, as well as vaccination between Canada and Taiwan. And I believe, Dr. Ji, you are in between. You are in North America and in Taiwan, and also in Canada. You agree that this is a very important topic we should focus on. We should continue explore how Canada healthcare system and Taiwan's national health insurance both healthcare system work on this, because there are not too many countries in the world having such mature and well-developed healthcare system like Taiwan and Canada. And so it's quite important issue. We may not just close it. We may open up very important topic in terms of research and analysis between Canada and Taiwan regarding vaccination and effectiveness of the vaccination, as well as how health system respond to this. I like to mention the primary health care, which is one issue in Taiwan very, very much debated and so-called criticized, because we are different approach regarding health service in primary health care and more centralized health care, like in Taiwan. And Canada may be less centralized. I don't know. We have to discuss this further. But when He Mei-Xiang talk about the post-marketing surveillance and Dr. Tai talking about this, we need to know who are doing this post-market surveillance. Usually the primary health care, the general practitioner. But now in Taiwan, they are going differently because medical centers are more focused, more empowered with this capacity to deal with the virus infection pandemic. So I don't know how Canada is doing on this, as compared with in Taiwan. So I see this is very important homework. We would take it for the next steps. The second, I would see, since we are both democratic countries, Canada just having a new government very soon. Taiwan has been very lucky since early 2020, last year. We already have a very stable and very good continuation of the government by President Tsai. We are very lucky. And so this continuation of the democratic operation and the government between Canada and Taiwan is how to handle the vaccine passport. I mean, that's very particular level. But for healthcare issues, which is also the core governance between the countries, is also very important. Maybe not as high as passport, but some kind of certificate, but also documentation, which is very important. I appreciate Dr. Ji mentioned about yellow fever. I did also receive that. You need to do booster yellow fever before you go to some of the country. And Taiwan is in Southeast Asia. We have a lot of leprosy, not in Taiwan, but in Indonesia and some of the Sierra countries. The leprosy is still a very important issue. And I remember when I started to go to apply for university in USA, we need to prove that we have some vaccination for polio vaccination, right? So this is sooner or later we have to mature enough to handle this, because before we did already, and now it's time. Certainly we have a problem that we do not have adequate scientific evidence to do all this. That's the reason we need a lot of good scientific effort, research analysis between us and between your country and our country, Canada and Taiwan, and to make it available, because I see the citizen which been vaccinated or which is waiting to be vaccinated, they are thinking what's the benefit besides antibody. It's also social cultural acceptance, right? If you have family that do not want to get vaccinated, how do other members which already get vaccinated talk about this over their dinner and the lunchtime? So vaccination for Canada and Taiwan already been a dominant issue. It's a government policy, and we should go down to healthcare level to provide adequate documentation that people just talk about antibody testing yesterday in Taiwan, which has been the big argument. But the government decided to open up for antibody testing. Why testing antibody? Is to see how effectiveness of the vaccination. So the story would not finish by vaccination. The story will continue because it's regarding the health of the individual and the right to do vaccination or to travel and to back to the recovery to the normal society, which is all essentially important at this moment. So I learned a lot from your presentation, and I see we have a lot of homework. I hope you agree that we still have a lot of homework between Canada and Taiwan regarding the healthcare issues, regarding the health system comparison, regarding effectiveness of the vaccination, or even including compare the data of the post-marketing surveillance, which I haven't heard too much. I look forward to hearing more from Canada side and from United States that we have to learn from you to share our experience. So the last word, I appreciate your contribution to this very important topic and this very important meeting today. I'm wondering, Lilian Cho, Professor Cho, you would like to say a few words, put some remark before we close? I'm wondering she's still on the stage.
Dr. Chen, if you don't mind, I just had 20 seconds of comments.
Yes.
As a Taiwanese Canadian, I definitely love to see more engagement, academically in medicine and social engagement. Dr. Chu and I will pursue that mission and the homework that you've assigned to us. We'll continue to facilitate the best we can between the dialogue between Taiwan and Canada.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope Jason Wang and you will join us in the next journey, including Professor Ji.
Sure, sure.
Thank
It's
you.
my honor.
I don't know whether Professor Cho is coming to the stage, but if not, because we are running out of time, I appreciate very much for your contribution. I hope we can write some of the minutes or report from this conference that to make this journey further. I think we have to run. We have to run now instead of walking, because this virus is still around us very much. And I know Justin Gao has been between Taiwan and Canada many times in the last 18 months. I admire him so much. I think every time he travels across the Pacific, he's thinking about the issue. And we have to put this on our table, on our coming agenda. Thank you so much. Maybe I would say goodbye to you until next time. And thank you, Dr. Ji.
Thank you.
Dr.
Thank you very much.
And Jason, very nice. And also Wen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
See you
Have a
next
great
time.
day now.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you.
Thank you.